Welcome to Fridays with Seniors on the Peter Leg podcast. I'm Chari Hinete Elon, filling in for Peter Leg. In this episode, we'll dive into an important topic that affects many in our senior community: social isolation and loneliness. We'll explore its impact on seniors' well being and discuss practical ways we can offer support to ensure that they stay connected and thrive, whether you're a caregiver, family member, or just someone who cares, a neighbor, a friend. This conversation is for you. Let's work together to make a positive difference in the lives of our seniors. We will be joined by Heather Trelevin, Executive Director of BC Community Response Networks. Hi, Heather. Welcome to Fridays with Seniors.
Hello, Cherry. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Also joining us today is Zabina Rahiman, Shine Manager of Senior Services Society of BC. Welcome back, Zabina.
Thank you, Cherry. Nice to see you. And hello, Heather.
Hello.
It's great to have you both on the podcast. Heather, let us start with you. Tell us about yourself and your role.
I have been executive director with the BC Association of Community Response Networks for just 7 months now. So it's still a relatively new role. And I took over from the amazing Sherry Baker, who was in the position for 14 years and really helped grow the organization from its roots. So I have big shoes to fill, but it's an exciting new position for me.
Yeah, and what does BC Association of Community Response Networks do?
So BCCRN is grew out of a need for ongoing permanent provincial support structures for the benefit of vulnerable adults in our communities who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. We're a registered nonprofit society and have CRNs across the province, which I'll tell you about as we chat today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Heather. How about you, Zabina?
Hi, yes, Cherry. So I've been with Senior Services Society of BC. This is starting my third year, so I'm really excited about that. I joined as a housing navigator, and now recently I am working in the role of the Shine Manager, our provincial Shine program, which is a community network of supports housing navigators across the province that are here to support seniors in our region. So, yeah, I'm excited about the role, and I enjoy my role so much it just doesn't feel like work. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's wonderful. That's very
I'm
important to
happy.
enjoy and
Yes,
being passionate with what you do, both for you, Heather, and Zabina.
yes.
Earlier, I said we're going to talk about isolation and loneliness, which I would dare think is quite common among our seniors. So, Heather, what is social isolation?
Social isolation is defined as not having relationships, contact with, or support from others. It also includes having few social roles for the individual themselves and an absence of mutually rewarding relationships, places where you come together to connect with other folks. Many people are quite happy living by themselves, but when there's a lack of individuals or people that you can rely on in your lives, that you end up feeling isolated. High quality social connections are essential to our mental health and well being, and so that's why they're so important.
Yeah, you've mentioned mutually rewarding relationship. How can one have a mutually rewarding relationship when he or she is socially isolated? Yeah, right. That's a challenge.
Yes, yes.
What about loneliness? How are these related? Social isolation and loneliness.
So loneliness is when you feel like you're disconnected. So it's different than social isolation in that it's a perceived sense of not being connected to people. And the difference between ideal social relationships and what's actually happening in your life. If everyone, it seems like everyone else has friends, is out doing things, and you don't feel like you are connected in that same way. Statistics Canada estimates that 30% of Canadian seniors are at risk of becoming socially isolated.
Yeah. So, at the risk of being socially isolated, what are the incidents or circumstances that lead them to be socially isolated?
Um, Many of the Risk factors for isolation are the very same that are possible for experiencing abuse. The older seniors, being over age 80, we often find as we age, our world shrinks a little bit. Maybe we don't drive anymore. We don't get around as well. We aren't able to um, take part in a number of the activities that we used to do. Having compromised health, chronic health conditions can also create the opportunity for isolation. Being low income, lacking awareness of what's available in the community and how you can get involved. And immigrant seniors in particular are more susceptible sometimes because of a lack of language skills, maybe a loss of status within their family, and depending on younger family members.
Yeah. In your work with Senior Services Society, Zabina, what are some of the situations you encounter with seniors and isolation?
Yes, quite often we see seniors who are living alone and single, having just lost a partner or a spouse, and sometimes moving to a new neighborhood, losing the connections they once had in their lives, into their neighborhood and their neighbors, and just moving away from their contacts and their network that they have. We also have seniors who may become socially isolated and lonely because they're experiencing health conditions. Perhaps they're not able to be as mobile as they once were. Sometimes there's mental health challenges, cognitive challenges that they're dealing with, and sometimes they're not connected to supports in that area. Also, just a lack of transportation, where a senior who maybe once drove before now no longer drives. Maybe their health has caused their mobility to change, so they're not as able to get out as much as they used to. So just having that physical disconnect piece really does contribute to that because then they just become isolated, and they aren't connected to supports in that sense.
Yeah. Can you say, like, how common is this social isolation?
Oh, very common, as Heather mentioned. Like according to Statistics Canada, 30% of seniors in the country are at risk of becoming, socially isolated or lonely. And we saw this trend rise, especially during the pandemic. And people who weren't connected to technology support, a lot of the seniors that we work with, they don't have access to the internet. Some of them may have older phone devices like flip phones where they aren't technologically equipped to connect out there. And that sort of is the trend that we're still seeing. We're trying to change that narrative a little bit with our social programs. And I'm sure there's other organizations out there in the community that too do try and work with seniors to connect them in society and just helps give them a sense of purpose too and connect to others in the community.
Yeah. Heather, what are the ways that your association help to try to connect seniors and avoid social isolation and loneliness?
The BC Association of Community Response Networks has CRNs across the province. So there are 92 across the province of BC, and these are collective informal networks where concerned community members, service providers, agencies, and businesses, professionals come together to create that coordinated community response to adult abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. Um, CRNs focus on building overall community capacity to address and prevent adult abuse. So they do this through outreach, education, relationship building, identifying gaps and ensuring that there is no duplication of services, and systemic advocacy in general from a relationship building perspective.
Yeah, I want you to go deeper into relationship building. How can we, as an individual, help to build relationships, especially with seniors, and help them avoid this social isolation?
Yeah, so many of our CRNs across the province hold social engagement initiatives in order to provide the education. So there's coffee and connect opportunities, luncheons, holding information and resource tables at shopping malls or senior centers. And so this provides an opportunity for seniors to get connected with the community and then also learn about risk for abuse of any kind. Abuse can be financial, physical, sexual, psychological, or the neglect and self-neglect piece. So we do our best throughout the province to connect with older adults where they live in the community.
Yeah, you've mentioned abuse and neglect. Zabina, what is the connection, if there is any, between social isolation, loneliness, and elder abuse?
Yeah, when a senior becomes isolated, I mean, they could fall victim of isolation, loneliness, and abuse. Sometimes it gets undetected if they're living on their own. We've had situations where seniors have come to us, they've been victims of romance scams, financial scams, because for the sheer reason of not having connections and support. They are very trusting and they get befriended by people who prey on their vulnerability and take advantage of them that way. We see that in so many other forms. Also, we see it in caregiver burnout when you're caring for a loved one. This just can lead to stress and fatigue, and unknowingly and intentionally, the caregiver can start. Um, Showing forms of abuse towards their loved one, verbal or, physical. And if that caregiver is themselves not connected to support through a support group, asking for respite, to be able to, just have days where, maybe a 4 hour window where they're getting a break from caring because that is a full time role and being connected to mental health support if it's really weighing on them because that can lead to anxiety and depression to the caregiver, and if something happens to the carer then that can impact as well the person that they're caring for. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
very very prevalent in that space as well.
yeah. And so, Heather, in your experience, how can we help?
Um, as the average citizen, senior service provider, I think befriending, helping seniors build those social connections, that community connection is really important. By creating inclusive and welcoming environments, we can ensure that all adults are feeling safe and supported. Um, you can direct folks to the BCCRN website, bccrns.ca, which will show you where your CRNs are located throughout the province of BC, and there's an opportunity to connect in your own community. I really believe that that's where a lot of the most important and valuable connections are made, is that those grassroots community programs and connections, senior centers through the community services. When it comes to reporting adult abuse, we have no legislation that makes reporting mandatory. However, designated agencies are mandated to respond if there is a report of abuse and to investigate. And those designated agencies are health authorities and Community Living BC and Providence Health. So those would be
Yeah.
your first call if you're experiencing um, and needing to report abuse.
And are these services free?
Yes, those services are free. And also, Seniors First BC is a tremendously good resource. They have legal advocates, lawyers on staff, and offer programming in the community as well. And a seniors abuse information line where folks can call in for individual support if they want to talk about their case and get some advice.
What is the number for the seniors line?
The Seniors Abuse and Information Line number is toll free throughout the province, 1 866 437 1940. And if you're in the lower mainland, 604 437 1940.
Or how about if they're in a certain situation where they are in danger or at risk? What should they do?
Absolutely. If there's any immediate harm or risk, individuals should contact their local RCMP or police detachments for assistance.
Yes. Zabina, if they need support, how can they connect with the Senior Services Society?
Yeah, thank you for that question because a big part of our support services program involves volunteering. We do have a lot of seniors who volunteer with us, but I just would like to recommend anybody who is listening is to try and have a supportive network in your lives. If you have access to health and community services in your area, local organizations can also provide valuable information about social programs. And coming back to ourselves at Senior Services Society, we have our support program for seniors where we have our friendly support calls. That is done by volunteers. We have our bus that takes local seniors for outings such as lunches and to local events. Volunteers also are involved in our grocery shopping, online ordering. And happy to say that one of our volunteers recently won an award for his time and service that he's been volunteering in the community here. So it's, and it just helps give seniors a sense of purpose, a sense of, um, looking forward that they have something to do. And some of the seniors that we work with, once we find them housing, they actually come back and want to volunteer with us because they would just love to give back in that space. So it really does help them with feeling a sense of purpose and wanting to give back. So that's a really nice thing that we see and something that we like to encourage. Um, there's so many organizations out there that are looking for volunteers, and even if it's just connecting with an organization, it would be, something that I actually plan on doing uh, in the future as well. So that's something that I would recommend.
Yeah, that is great. Just to build a community of seniors helping each other and
Yes.
finding purpose on doing something meaningful and giving back to the community is a great opportunity to not just avoid social isolation and loneliness, but also to help others being happy and find meaning, right? And purpose
Yes.
in their lives. Anything else that you'd like to add, Heather?
Zamina made a really good point about the importance of volunteering and being connected to community. We really believe that elder abuse prevention is a collective responsibility. It can happen to everyone, and it's up to the community to help prevent it. So, staying connected is really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you so much, Heather. How about you, Zabina? Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm glad, Heather. Thank you for sharing the connection or the contacts of who seniors can call for support in that space. It's just a phone call away, and you just want to say that it's important to reach out. To build that sense of community, and there's so many organizations that are out there to support. So hopefully people receiving this message will see that there are opportunities out there to connect.
We're all in this together.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today on
Welcome.
Fridays with Seniors. Zabina and Heather, thank you so much. We had a meaningful conversation about isolation and loneliness and how they deeply affect our senior population. I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude once again to our guests, of course, from BC Association of Community Response Networks and Senior Services Society of BC for sharing their insights and experiences, Heather Trelevin and Zabina Rahiman. As we wrap up, I encourage you to reflect on the important role we all play in supporting seniors in our communities. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear from you. Here's a question to ponder. What are some ways we can reduce social isolation and loneliness among seniors in our community. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments or participate in our poll on the podcast. Let's keep this conversation going and work together to create a more connected and supportive environment for our seniors. Thank you once again for listening. I'm Chari Hineta Elon, filling in for Peter Legg. And until next time, this is Fridays with Seniors on the Peter Legg podcast. Let's take care and stay engaged with those around you. This podcast is sponsored by BC Association of Community Response Networks. Thank you too to Senior Services Society of BC. Till next time, here on Fridays with Seniors.